Good morning to you. I hope that you had a great weekend and appreciate you waking up with us. Look at the beautiful skyline there in New York City. Sun rising over Central Park. Sure. I'm Heather Childers, and you're watching Fox and Friends First.
Yeah, good morning to you. I'm Rob Schmidt. Thanks for starting your day with us. President Trump back to work in Washington, fresh off meeting with world leaders at the G20 summit in Germany.
That's right. Our commander-in-chief setting the record straight, knocking down any chance of a Russian-American cybersecurity unit.
Hey, Griff Jenkins live at our nation's capital with details on where the U.S. stands now. Griff.
Hey, Rob and Heather, good morning. I think I know where it stands. The president returned from the summit and that lengthy meeting with Vladimir Putin, tweeting up a storm over the weekend, saying it's time to move forward, working constructively with Russia. And in one tweet said he and Putin discussed creating, quote, an impenetrable cybersecurity unit. That drew immediate backlash from Democrats and Republicans. Senator Marco Rubio tweeting, quote, partnering with Putin on a cybersecurity unit is akin to partnering with Assad on a chemical weapons unit. But by days in yesterday, the president appeared to knock down any notion of a joint cyber effort, saying, quote, the fact that President Putin and I discussed a cybersecurity unit doesn't mean I think it can happen. It can't. But a ceasefire can and did. That last reference to one of the biggest takeaways, perhaps, to the Putin meeting, a ceasefire in Syria, and several members of the administration took to the Sunday shows to drive home the message that the president did not accept Putin's denial that Russia meddled in the 2016 election.
The president absolutely did not believe the denial of President Putin. What the president did is he immediately came into the meeting, talked about Russian meddling in the U.S. election, went after that issue at least 2 separate times. This was not just
But missing in those series of tweets was the president directly rejecting Putin's denial. So we shall see. That has some lawmakers like Senator Lindsey Graham still troubled.
When it comes to Russia, I am dumbfounded. I am disappointed. And at the end of the day, he's hurting his presidency by not embracing the fact that Putin's a bad guy who tried to undercut our democracy, and he's doing it all over the world.
You know, one of the things...
What will we hear from the president today? I don't know. There are no public events on his schedule. Perhaps an opportunity to do some tweeting. We'll see, guys.
Could be, and work on some health care, too. All
Yeah.
right, Griff, thanks so much.
Thanks. Well, something he may be tweeting about today is this response that is coming over his daughter, Ivanka, sitting at one of the tables in one of the meetings during the G20.
Briefly at the G20 summit, she sat in for the president who had to step out. You know, the Twitter world and a lot of the mainstream media and the critics of the administration went wild with this. Here's a quote from New York Times, I believe it's a columnist, Charles Blow. Why the hell is Ivanka Trump sitting in for daddy at G20 meetings? What are her qualifications? Who voted for her?
And then here's Elizabeth Spears from Gawker. She says that the G20 is not Take Your Daughter to Work Day.
And this one we thought was the funniest one. This is a women's rights activist, Amy Siskind. This kind of thing happens all the time in dictatorships. The irony there is that the president allowing his daughter to sit in for him.
Yeah.
And here's a montage of what we saw in the mainstream media.
Ivanka Trump, she briefly took a role, on a critical role, we should say, at the G20 summit.
The president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, sat in on meetings at the G20. What's her role?
We should point out senior administration officials are downplaying that this was any sort of, big deal. It's a reminder that, when President Trump is abroad or even when he's dealing with policies on the domestic front, it is a family business at times. This is the deal when you're talking about the Trump White House.
And we should, of course, mention, obviously, she's a senior advisor as well to the president. And here's what Angela Merkel had to say. She actually defended her, saying that the delegations themselves decide, should the president not be present for a meeting, who will then take over and sit in the chair. Ivanka Trump was part and parcel of the American delegation, so that is something that other delegations also do. And it's very well known that she works at the White House and is also engaged in certain initiatives, including the one that she sat in on.
Certainly, which we should say was a partnership with Africa, migration, and health. And not to, minimize that or marginalize it at all. But when you have North Korea, ISIS, Syria, the world in the situation it is right now, probably not the most critical of the things that the G20 is talking about. And at the same time, we should also say that this is something that the president was sitting in on, had to step out briefly. Who knows why? Bathroom break, phone call, turkey sandwich. Who knows?
Right.
But she sat in for maybe a brief period of time, according to the White House. White House in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, and we were talking about the response from the women's rights advocates. It was interesting that Donald Trump Jr. had a similar response to that. And he said, well, would it be better if I sat in, meaning himself? You know, what would the response if he had done that?
Right, yeah, that was another great one. So it's just, you know, people are going to criticize anywhere they can. There's crazies like this on both sides of the aisle that attack everything that the other side does. There you have it.
But as you mentioned, it is back to business, or at least it should be for Congress today. After a week-long recess, Republicans making their top priority to repeal and replace Obamacare.
Yeah, the Senate hold